Hello, and thank you for joining today for our second webinar on our exclusive COMO journey to the High Arctic. Today is all about introducing you to these two very special expeditions created through COMO's partnership with Natural World Safaris, taking the COMO's philosophy beyond the familiar and into one of the world's most remote destinations, the Svalbard archipelago. We're offering two distinct sailings this year. The first one early season, 13th to 23rd of May, and the second from the 13th to 24th of September. So firstly, a few introductions. I'm Louise James. I'm the Global Communications Director, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Ben Rowley, who's a polar specialist at Natural World Safaris. Welcome, Ben. And Daniel Moran, who is COMO's Vice President of Culinary. Welcome, Dan. So there will be time for questions at the end, so please put them in the chat box. But we're going to kick off straight away to Ben, who is going to tell us a little bit about this wonderful scenery we see in front of us to explain these lovely two sailings.
Hi everybody, I'm Ben. I'm the polar specialist at Natural World Safaris, and I have the pleasure of talking you through Svalbard today and everything that you can see on this these two fantastic trips. So Svalbard is a high Arctic archipelago up near 78 to 80 degrees north, so super high Arctic. Amazing wildlife, amazing scenery, as you can see in this landscape here. That's kind of one of the things that you can expect to see, especially early season in May. Huge glaciers, lots of ice, very grand Arctic scenery. And our goal for these two trips is to explore as much of the archipelago as possible, see as much landscape and wildlife and nature as possible, and come back having made lots of memories, and really experience it as best as it can be. So a lot of Svalbard is glaciated. This glacier here is a prime example of the sort of types of landscapes that you can see. And we'll be using the Zodiacs, using the ship to explore along the front of these glaciers, searching for wildlife. It's common to find things like polar bears. Sometimes you'll find various whale species around the front of glaciers like this, exploring, looking for food. Here's a prime example of walrus hauled out on a rock with the ship that is used for this expedition, the Polar Front, nicely sort of framed there behind. Walrus are actually a success story in Svalbard. They're growing in numbers year on year. So they're beautiful creatures, and you can expect to see, a good number of them throughout both trips, actually in May and in September. Real wildlife paradise, and that shot that you see there frames exactly what you can sort of hope to see numerous times.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about the ship? How many guests it holds?
Certainly, yeah. So Polar Front is a ship that carries 12 people. But actually, for a ship that carries just 12 people, it's really large. So it basically means that there's a lot of space on board. Cabins are an excellent size. A lot of other 12-passenger ships, are much smaller, much more tighter in terms of space on board. But Polar Front's the opposite. It's a big ship. It's got 8 cabins, 12 people maximum that it can take. And it means that you've got lots and lots of space on board with good facilities. And actually, in that shot, you can see that really large back deck. That's where we have a sauna, and we have ample space for outdoor dining as well, which would be one of the fantastic things that you can enjoy on Polar Front. She's a nice strengthened ship, perfect for exploring through these waters, and has had many, many, many years of being used partly as an expedition ship, but also as a research vessel up in waters like this prior to being a research ship. And this wonderful shot you can see in front of a big walrus with the Zodiac behind. Again, so the ship has 2 Zodiacs. These are the Zodiacs that you'll be using to get from the ship either to shore or to go out on a Zodiac cruise and explore around. You might explore through the ice flows around the front of a glacier, or if there are walrus in the water, like in this shot, it's prime for wildlife photography. You're super low down. You're really at eye level with the wildlife in the water if you've got seals or walrus like this, which is prime for wildlife photography. So yeah, this shot is quite typical of what you can sort of experience at some points through the voyage.
Great. And this wonderful scenery as well. I mean, I think that encapsulates the whole. Great shot.
Yeah, absolutely. This is incredible. It's almost Antarctic in terms of sort of size of ice as well. So this will be, I don't know for sure, but this will be an island called Nordaustlandet towards the northeast, which will probably be off limits for May because May is very, very icy. This area around that you see here will be completely frozen solid in May. But come September, when the restrictive sea ice has kind of has moved away and given us better access, we should be able to get access to areas like this. There is also a massive, several of them actually, but huge meltwater waterfalls which come cascading off the top of these ice walls. There's one known as Austfonne, and that's quite common to be able to get around there in sort of the latter half of the season. So September should be an option for that, and you get vast quantities of meltwater coming off the top and pouring into the ocean just off the edge, like you can see in that shot. Yeah, spectacular scenery.
Yeah, wonderful, great. Also, it's a slightly wider shot there. Could you tell us a little bit about our expedition leads?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have two highly experienced, highly capable, and above all, fantastic people as the expedition guides for this trip. So we have Hadley Measham. Hadley is from the UK. Hadley is one of our expedition leaders who has worked with us for a long time. He's done a huge amount of guiding in Svalbard, in Greenland, and across the wider Arctic. And also around Antarctica as well. So he has many, many seasons under his belt. I think that's over 15 or 16 years now that he's been doing it pretty much solidly for. So super, super experienced. And then we also have Anais from Chile. Anais is wonderful as well. She does a lot of guiding, particularly in Antarctica, and she's guided for us on previous COMO trips with Hadley throughout the whole of Svalbard and into Greenland as well. And one of our Anais's, you can see it here in the shot, one of her passions is photography. She's an incredible photographer. So if there are any photographers who are sort of looking to bring their equipment to Svalbard and maybe get a little bit of guidance or inspiration, Anais is your person for that. She's got a huge amount of experience and just inspiration. She's so passionate that you'll come back sort of with a lot of knowledge and inspiration from this trip, definitely.
Great, perfect. I think photography is obviously key for this trip, as you can see from this wonderful picture. Yeah, to get that. So, can you tell us a little bit about how a day would usually run on board?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So the whole ethos of our trips is and this trip is to see as much wildlife and nature as possible. So that kind of guides what we'll do during the day. Now, assuming that weather and ice conditions allow, we'll aim to be off the ship at least twice per day. So that'll be a morning excursion and an afternoon excursion as kind of standard if everything allows. So we'll use those zodiacs that you saw in the previous shots to either go from the ship to shore and then maybe go for a hike or a wander around and sort of explore where we've landed. Or we can use those zodiacs to go for a zodiac cruise and explore around a glacial front or through around an ice flow. Or sometimes there are big there are cliffs with thousands and thousands of breeding pairs of guillemots or kittiwakes or general seabirds, and we can sort of explore along the base of those, and that's amazing. And there's like a swarm of bees, sort of flying over your head with all the birds. The sounds, the smells, or everything is very invigorating. So we'll have 2 landings or 2 zodiac cruises per day. Each one will be somewhere 2 to 3 hours, depends on sort of where you are and what the group kind of ethos is. But yeah, the aim is to get off the ship as much as possible and explore. And it might be for photography, it might be for seeing the nature, the wildlife, the glacier, whatever. But yeah, we'll make the most of wherever we are at any one time.
Because I understand that obviously this is our second year of doing these expeditions, and actually the itinerary is very fluid. So from day to day, it's planned depending on where we're going to go. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always say there's no kind of set itinerary. Well, there is no set itinerary for a polar trip. So, sometimes all the time we are guided by the weather, we're guided by the ice conditions, and the expedition leaders and the ship captain will get together sort of multiple times every day to decide what the forecast is looking like for the coming days, and that'll dictate kind of where we go. And it might be that we head south first if the weather in the north is looking bad, or vice versa. Will be guided by the ice. And sometimes, you can, if it's bad weather, you can be on a plan D or plan E or plan F by the end of the day, and then the team will constantly be thinking on their feet to adapt to what the weather throws. So yeah, never a set itinerary. It's like a day 2 to the final day is, exploring Svalbard, and we'll make the most of every day as they kind of come. And that's the beauty of it, is the flexibility.
Exactly. That sounds brilliant fun.
Yeah.
So obviously we've got 2 very distinct seasons. Could you just explain a little bit more in terms of the wildlife, especially what you're going to see between those 2 seasons and the landscapes alongside?
Absolutely, yeah. So if we start with May, so the early season trip in May, that's the middle of May. That's when Svalbard still has a very wintry white coat. So there's still a lot of snow around. There's a lot of sea ice around, and that sea ice is prime polar bear hunting habitat. So the seals will be hauled out on the edge of the ice, and the bears basically are looking to ambush those seals and hunt for the seals. So it's a great sort of area for seals, for walrus to be hauled out, but also for bears kind of hunting as well. It also means that for any photographers wanting that really white, pristine Arctic environment, May is a really, really good time for that because it is still super wintry. From wildlife point of view, polar bears, walrus, Svalbard reindeer, lots of different migratory bird species, some seabirds, and then some things like geese and that as well. There will be low numbers of whales at that time, but they will be increasing. So there is a chance that we might see whales. Species that we can hope to see would be humpback whales, sometimes blue and fin whales, the largest and second largest species of mammal anywhere on Earth, which they're incredible to see. Beluga whales, the little white whales that swim around in pods of sort of 40, 50 or so. They're really cool. They're really inquisitive, so they often like to come around the ship and sort of explore. They're great to see. But yeah, polar bears is the main draw for most people. There are a couple of technicalities around how close we're able to get to polar bears. So for the early season trip on or around Svalbard, we're only allowed to get up to 500 meters from the bears. If we head north away from land, we can let the bears come a little bit closer to us. But for September, we can get up to 300 meters from the polar bear. So a little bit closer for the September trip. And September as well is when we have one early season trip, and then September is later. So some of the wildlife will be starting to begin its migration south at that point. So you'll sort of see the transition from summer into autumn, into fall, however you want to call it. And you get sort of a mixture of kind of both summer and autumn conditions. This is a beautiful shot. That's an Arctic fox in its kind of summer coat, having lost its really thick, warm white coat that it has during the winter. They're beautiful creatures. Very, very small, actually. And very inquisitive as well, And again, if we are on shore, they have no real fear of humans. They don't need to be scared of humans because they're not hunted. And actually, they can come up quite close to you sometimes and just sort of, inspect you, check you out, see if you've got any food, and then they're sort of, they'll go about their business. But they're great little things.
I'm sure.
And that looks like a glaucous gull on the water. And yeah, bird life in Svalbard is incredible. There's a lot of species that come in for the summer. We can expect to see puffins, king eiders, and common eiders. They are really beautiful ducks which migrate in for the summer season as well. Lots of gull species. Any birders might like the ivory gull. It's an Arctic specific gull which is all white, quite small. That's quite a draw for any birders. So if there are any birders, the chance to see an ivory gull is great. The world's most northerly colony of puffins come to Svalbard for the summer. Birders will not be disappointed with Svalbard.
Yeah.
And that's a cute little shot of what looks like quite a young Svalbard reindeer. So that's a separate subspecies of reindeer that's only found on Svalbard. They are very small. They have very short legs. They almost look like sort of pygmy reindeer, but they are dotted all around Svalbard. And actually, you can see them in the town of Longyearbyen sometimes, just kind of grazing on grass at the side of the road. But yeah, very photogenic. They're not scared of people, And if you're a photographer, to get a shot like that is a nice outcome.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. That was a really great introduction. And if anyone's got any specific questions for Ben, please put them in the chat. But one of the USPs of this experience is really the mix between the polar expertise of natural world safaris and COMO's approach to well-being, dining, and personalized experience. So I'm really delighted to have Chef Dan with us today, who actually traveled with the guests last year. So he has some great experience. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for joining us. So you've cooked all over the world, from tropical islands to mountain resorts. What does it mean, both personally and professionally, for you to cook in one of the most remote environments in the world?
Well, Louise, firstly, it's always exciting, and there's always a challenge coming up with the weather's changing all the time. Being in different locations and sceneries through the porthole is always completely different. So, it's very exciting for me to bring these flavors from COMO, from globally COMO, to bring them to the actual vessel to show the people what we actually have in COMO globally. So it's very exciting in the sense where I'm keeping them entertained with the different food varieties that we're giving them every day and trying to help them experience the comfort, what they require during their stay.
Yeah. And for you personally, what was that experience like, actually experience Svalbard for the first time? Was it awe-inspiring?
It was awe-inspiring. The scenery was absolutely amazing, and just the environment was just, breathtaking a lot of the times when we were just going through the different areas, the different weather patterns, and crushing through the ice was always exciting. But also too, meeting the guests on the voyage and seeing the smiles on the guests' faces when they would return back from being outside and sharing their stories of what they'd seen that day was very exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine the dinner conversation is quite incredible.
Well,
so can you tell us a little bit more about the COMO Shambhala ethos and how you translate this into the expedition environment?
So, wellness is a very strong pillar of our cuisine and what we offer in COMO. Not to say that it's just all wellness cuisine on voyage and you're not going to be on a diet. We make sure we cater to everybody here, but the essence of the food will be very simply prepared, nutritious, and making sure that we give people the comfort they require when they're on the voyage. Generally with a lot of our cuisines as well, because we're a global band and we're experiencing different types of cuisines, we like to incorporate those all together during the voyage to give people some variety during their stay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, having been with COMO for the year, I think the variety of dishes globally as well are incredible, and obviously through our cookbook as well, we've seen that. So I think to bring all those flavors to the experience of the guest is quite incredible, really.
Yeah, the food on the journey is generally a lot about the comfort and warmth as well, because you are in a very sort of cold location and you are doing a lot of activities in the day. We're going out to the icebergs and going to sea on land. So a lot of the people come back, almost quite hungry. So we need to make sure that we're very generous and give them something hearty and satisfying, almost the food that feels comforting for them, almost like a blanket to keep them warm, to make sure that it's a safe space and a place that they will return to and there'll be something there for them.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So as we touched on earlier, with this fluid itinerary, sort of, and also one point we haven't touched on, which we can talk a bit later, is obviously the daylight hours as well in the early season. How do you plan your menus for the guests? Because are you working directly with the expedition leads to work out how you're going to plan these dishes?
Yes. On a daily basis, we'll always work with the expedition leaders because we don't know what's going to happen outside with the wildlife. So we vary the timings of the meals quite around the actual environment. So I speak with the leaders of the guys and they tell us what's going on, and we create the meal periods around there. But, we'll always make sure that when people return, there's plenty of sort of warming soups, fresh breads, and, deep flavors to warm them up. But generally on a daily routine, we always will have a breakfast that will start at 7 a.m. Okay, and that's sort of very relaxed, nourishing type of breakfast with fruits, pastries, cereals, and of course, hot a la carte dishes that are on offer. And then we go into generally a lunchtime period when they return back from their journey outside. We bring them back in, and a lunchtime will generally be more of a casual dining experience. And with that casual dining experience, it's more of a social thing where they come together as a family style dining of lunch, where they can talk and do whatever they would like to do, or they might have a little rest. And then generally they go back out again, okay, and they will go out to go and look at more wildlife. And when they return, we'll always have some type of hot tea or freshly baked pastries and cookies when they return back before we lead into a dinner service. And generally the dinners start around about 8 o'clock in the evening. And this will generally be a 3 or 4 course sort of menu that would be inspired by different cuisines around COMO. And I mean, the timings can change as we discussed before with Ben, because we don't know what to expect with the wildlife around us. We have been conducting or having a dinner service, and next minute people say, oh wow, there's polar bears out on to the left of us, and so everybody will get up out of their seats and run for the polar bears, or there's puffins over so and so we need to finish dinner early and run for the puffin sighting. So we're very sort of being the chef on board, and then we have to be very fluid like that.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. So, I mean, obviously, going out, into the archipelago, there's no shops. You cannot go and get any last minute supplies. So you obviously have to take everything with you on board.
Yeah.
Are you working a lot with the local ingredients? Tell us a little bit about how you kind of bring that
Yes, I
influence
do.
in.
I do work with a lot of the local ingredients. I mean, a lot of everything comes out along the bean when we're there, and we try to bring in some of these northern ingredients into the actual cuisine as well. If it's the Arctic char, if it is the reindeer, if it is cod. So we generally try to incorporate a lot of these flavors into all these products into our actual cuisine. But I actually sort of hand carry a lot of spices up with me to make sure that I can sort of comfort the people with different styles of cuisine.
Brilliant. Yeah, definitely bring that Asian influence in, which sounds great.
Yeah.
And I understand you even did some fishing with the guests last year. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely there is that sort of, we have had the opportunity on certain areas when we get to an area where we have fished cod before, which was exciting for me because the voyage going for a certain amount of days, as you said, we're not close to any general store or supermarket. So, we need to think about our provision well, and use everything that we can and make sure that it lasts the full voyage, because we're actually in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, these exciting times when we do get the opportunity to fish cod, which we did on our last voyage, which was exciting for the guests, but it was actually more exciting for the guests to see that they actually caught the fish. And then that evening, there was 3 courses of that fish on the actual table, which blew a lot of minds, I feel, for the people, definitely.
Yeah,
so I hope we get an opportunity like that this time again.
Yeah, brilliant. And obviously we're not joined by Matteo Pasquale today, who is our bodywork expert, but could you tell us a little bit more about the well-being offering on board and how this kind of completes the COMO experience, really?
Well, with Matthias on board, our therapist, he's generally the most popular person on the ship sometimes, because obviously everybody's queuing up to have their massages, and everybody's allocated a certain amount of massages per voyage, and he's completely booked the whole time. So Matthias spends his time with guests at meal periods, talking to them and talking about some of the actual wellness and the direction that he takes the massage, and sort of brings the people in and connects with the people as well to make sure they know what to experience when they do have their massage. Or, being in this environment where it is a cold environment and it is quite physical, jumping in the zodiacs and jumping on land and jumping on, different areas. I mean, people do get that need for certain areas to be concentrated on, definitely in the deep tissue and all these styles of massages.
Sounds perfect. And I'm sorry, I didn't show this wonderful picture actually of one of your experiences you did last year. Maybe you could just talk us through what happened here.
Yeah, this is obviously weather permitted, and we like to have these, if it's long table lunches, which would be a lunch generally out on the back deck of the boat. So we'd have the long table lunch, and generally people would come back from their trip and they would jump on board, and we'd sort of conduct a really nice meal up there, and people would have fun and talk. And it's generally sort of a long lunch, that type of lunch. And this is always to do with the weather when the sun's out, making sure there's not too much wind, and we can do this dining either on the back deck, or sometimes we can do it on land as well, where there are opportunities that we do it on land. So we'd like to see how the weather is, and then we make it happen from there.
And yeah, I mean the ultimate scenic background there. And yeah, sorry, I this slide as well, just to show the extra well-being offering on board.
Yeah, the well-being, we were discussing this earlier on, and that was the polar plunge. I mean, that was sort of a real experience I had there, where I joined the guests to do the actual polar plunge, and then you can see you sort of walk down to the water level there, which is on the other side, doing the polar plunge, which will shock your body, but then you have the opportunity to jump in the spa, and we do have the steam room there as well. So that for the guests was quite exciting, and generally that leads into a lot of some hot tea and some other sort of snacks and aperitif sort of hours after that.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Dan. That was really great overview. I've got a couple of questions actually in the chat box, if that's okay. So one for you, Dan. Can dietary requirements be accommodated, and how do you manage these?
Yes, of course. So the dietary requirements in our last we did have some people with allergies, certain dairy-free, gluten-free allergies. So there's no problem at all accommodating to this. We also have to have had vegetarians and vegans as well. And as long as we know that these people are specified about certain dietary requirements or likes and dislikes, we sort of work around that, and they're just joined in the meals like the rest of everybody else, and they're just looked after normally.
Great, perfect, lovely. And were there any dishes that were particularly the guest favorite last year that everyone was asking for again? What was the highlight? I'd love to know what everyone was choosing.
I think a lot of the people, obviously there was certain highlights, and there was many comments about the cuisine that we were cooking on certain times. But basically what we really want to do is to make sure that the people are looked after and that they're happy. But highlights were things like the cod fishing, of course. But one of the biggest comments was that the food was very simple and honest food, and they commented on the genuine hospitality that the staff, myself, Matthias, and the guides offered. That was the most, thing that was talked about.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think there's no other questions in the chat box. So just to recap on the details, so obviously COMO Journey into the Arctic, we're offering the 2 sailings this year. The first one, 13th to the 23rd of May. And actually just got one more question through. Sorry, it just popped up just as I was saying that. One question was, what support is available if weather conditions change? That would be one for you, Ben.
Sure, absolutely. And that's an important one as well, because it is the Arctic. The weather does change. The weather is very dynamic. So we hope that the weather is clear and nice and allows to have those open deck lunches and things like that. But the weather will change. We have usually a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, right the way down sort of halfway through the alphabet sometimes. But Hadley and Ace will be making a sort of a constantly evolving plan based around weather. So the two of them and the captain will discuss multiple times every day what the forecast is looking like, what the conditions are locally where they are. And if it turns out that you get to the place that was intended to go ashore or to go on a Zodiac cruise, and actually it's too windy or there's too much swell, then they'll have a plan B that they can kind of get in place very quickly. So they are always thinking on their feet. To be honest, I have no idea when they sleep, because they're literally always active for sort of 10 days, coming up with a plan. But there's a huge amount of work goes into making sure that we can maximize the use of most hours of the day, really. And of course, the weather will like to throw its curveballs. But it's there's always sort of an option to go around a headland, for example, to get out of wind, or to just continue sailing on and go to see something else for the day. And of course, then you've got all those facilities on board. If you do have to have an extra few hours at sea, to get to another place, you've got the wellness areas, you've got the spa, you've got the hot tub, the sauna. Lots of things to keep you occupied, plus the scenery you're sailing in. So yeah, plans will evolve, but there's a lot to be able to sort of do in the meantime if you have suddenly a couple of hours spare. Yeah.
Well, endless stories as well from all of these experiences.
Endless stories.
Great. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Once again, the dates of the sailings are there. And please contact the expedition team at COMO if you need any extra support, and visit our website, comohotels.com. So thank you again, and thank you for your time, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.